How's everyone doing? So, Strength Chat episode 49, and today I have got another very special guest for you. Today I am joined by the Great Britain Junior Classic Powerlifting coach and strength coach, Jason Coultman. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
I'm not so bad. How have you recovered from the Euros yet?
Yeah, just about. I didn't actually realise how much it'd taken out of me. By the end of it, I was like, I could probably stay on and do more. And then halfway through last week, I was really starting to flag. Just about coming around now.
Yeah, I can imagine. There was some, from what I was watching, there was some absolutely awesome performances. So, all in all, how did sort of Great Britain end up? I know there was a couple of ones that spring to mind are Cat Smith with a world record deadlift, and obviously Luke Richardson absolutely smashing it. How were the rest of the performances?
I mean, everyone did really, really well. There were some tough European nations there. So for us to go and be in the mix, teams like Sweden and Russia and the Ukraine, we did really well. We picked up, I think, something close to 50 medals, which was pretty good. I think we had at least 4 or 5 European champions, which was really good as well. So yeah, everyone performed phenomenally. Obviously, like people like Kat and Luke Richardson did really well. So yeah, it was great performances all round, really.
Nice.
I think we got third place for the junior women and for the senior women. And I think the senior women were really close because they were tied with points with France. We actually lost out, I think, on points for that one.
Okay.
And then the men's teams, I think they both came fourth, so they did really well when they were only a couple of points behind the likes of Russia, Ukraine, and Sweden. So it was good.
Was that what you were expecting, or did people do better?
To be honest, I didn't really. Well, I knew it was going to be tough, and I think I expected it to be harder than the Worlds in Calgary, just because I was quite aware that quite a lot of people didn't show up at Calgary, and I knew that obviously being in Calgary, not many people wanted to travel that far.
Yeah.
With it being in Lithuania, it's a lot closer, especially next door to Poland and all the other really good powerlifting nations. So I knew that there were going to be really good teams there. So I was expecting it to be tough, but obviously with the personnel that we've got in the squad, I knew that Great Britain were always going to do really well anyway.
Yeah. Oh, good. I know from watching the live streams. It was really, really good to watch and see sort of the British lifters challenging against the more likely stronger nations that usually perform really well, which was good to see.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we get into sort of the meat of the episode, if you like, for those who might not know who you are and your background, you just want to have a little bit of a chat about your background and how you got to be in the position that you're in now.
So my background started off actually with sprinting. So I started sport from a really young age. If we're starting really, really young, then I started football from about 4 years old. So I've always been involved in sport. I've always been quite a bigger person, but kind of loved running and being athletic and stuff. Then probably seriously, I started getting into rugby at around 13. That was it. I went to secondary school, didn't know much about it, but I could run fast and I was pretty big. So that's how it started there.
Yeah.
And then I kind of progressed up the ranks. So I did county, divisional, county and regional. And then I got into an academy as well. So I was with Harlequins Academy from probably about 15 up until 18. Okay. And my life pretty much just like sport and rugby, trying to get onto like international stage and trying to break into the kind of, I think they called it academy teams for the matches for Harlequins. Okay. Turned out that I got released when I was 18. So just before you get contracts, that my confidence a little bit, and I was kind of like in limbo for a year. And it was, do I go semi-pro? Do I go to uni? I took a gap year, decided to go to uni, studied sport and exercise science, and played rugby at uni for the first kind of half of the year, and kind of fell out of love with it. So I was doing it more because I was good at it, not because I actually carried on enjoying it.
Right, okay.
after kind of the first half a year, I stopped playing rugby for the uni anyway. I carried on playing sevens and stuff like that. And that slowly fizzled out. And then after uni, I did a strength and conditioning internship. So that was working with sports teams, rugby, football, lacrosse, netball, rowing, kind of every sport in uni. Yeah. That was a company called Sport 981. So that was really good experience for me, and actually trying to apply everything that I'd learned from like A-level and university to actual like real life situations.
Yeah.
After that, I came back. I was going to do the UKSEA accreditation, and then kind of decided that actually I want to start earning money. So I got offered an internship place at Tottenham Hotspur.
Right.
I didn't take because that was like basically nothing, and it was doing it for free.
Right.
And I kind of stumbled across somebody that showed me into personal training. So I spoke to this woman, which is now my business mentor. And she basically said, you can go self-employed. So I was like, right, okay, what's that? Didn't really know much about it. Ended up getting a job in David Lloyd, working as a personal trainer for 8 months. Quickly realized that I'm doing things that I could do on my own and get paid triple the amount. So we were getting paid like £10, £13 an hour,
right.
£40. And I was like, mate, I need to get out and do it. So came back to London, because that was up in Nottingham where I went to uni, and just got a job as a freelance personal trainer at Soho Gyms in Clapham. And then that was kind of a big step, because obviously running your own business, trying to speak to people, get your own clients is a lot more difficult than having the security of having a salary and getting paid bonus for PT sessions.
Yeah.
So it took me probably a good year and a half to kind of figure out, walking the gym floor, talking to people, offering them certain things, this, that, and the other, trying to show my value to get clients.
Yeah.
That kind of worked in the end, and I kind of prevailed in that. And then I built up quite a good personal training business there. And during which time I met Lawrence Frankham. I know he's been on your podcast a couple of times.
Yeah.
And he kind of introduced me to powerlifting. So I got pretty bored just training. So I wasn't doing any sport at that time after I left uni. And I was like, I've got that hunger for sport again. Just kind of training and getting big for nothing didn't really think for me. So I entered a couple of strongman competitions. I trained at the Commander Temple for a little bit. I did 4 strongman competitions, I think, and I actually won them all. A couple were novice ones. And then it was kind of like the middle of the year, and there was no more competitions left. And that's when Lawrence kind of said to me, why don't you have a go at powerlifting? So I was always talking to him and asking him questions, because obviously trying to learn off of him is great, and any other that I can. So he said, give powerlifting a shot. So he started coaching me kind of like loosely. Within about 4 or 5 months, I was ready for my first competition. And then I was basically introduced to powerlifting.
Yeah.
At first, I thought, like, this is nothing. So I'm used to playing 80 minutes of rugby. My body's feeling battered. Strongman, you get a similar feeling to rugby. But powerlifting, I was like, squat, bench, and deadlift, 9 lifts. Like, I do that in a training session. It'll be fine. And my first competition was all right. That was good. I didn't really feel that beat up, but I had a lot left in the tank. And then as I kind of adapted and started lifting heavier weights, because before I met Lawrence, I didn't really do deadlifts. I just squatted, probably with really bad technique, and was just basically a gym rat. Learning the kind of ropes with powerlifting and more about strength training, I got more and more into it. And slowly that became my niche, which I prefer much more to developing strength in not just powerlifters, but athletes, rugby players. I've got a couple of sprint cyclists that I work with. Powerlifting created a great foundation for me to improve my knowledge about strength training for everything. And then it came to the point where I actually got picked for the national team. So I ended up competing in Texas, which gave me a taste of kind of international competition. And then from there, I was kind of just building up. I did the British in 2016, and then I got injured. After that injury, that was kind of another stepping stone. Picked up a back injury. So then I became kind of more aware of rehab and certain technical aspects of training and powerlifting as well.
Yeah.
So I doing a lot of research into that a lot more. And then I turned and said to Lawrence, like, I can't compete at the minute. So the next best thing is coaching. So I said, I really want to get into powerlifting coaching. And I just said to him, any competitions you go to, any athletes that you're coaching, would you mind if I just come and shadow you? And he needed the help at the time because he may have had 5 or 6 lifters competing at one time.
Yeah.
I probably went to about 7 or 8 competitions in the space of 12 to 14 months with Lawrence, and basically just shadowed him and Pete Sparks and watched how they did things and how they interacted with the athletes, how they picked the numbers, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And just picked it up like that. A couple of times he gave me a couple of his lifters to handle when he couldn't make competitions. And it just kind of developed and spanned from then. I ended up going to 4 internationals as an assistant coach. Well, 2 as an assistant coach and 2 as a coach.
Yeah.
And that's basically how I kind of, long story short, got to where I am now.
Yeah.
He stepped down and I'd been there for the last kind of 4 internationals. And he said, I think it'd probably be a good idea if you put your name forward for junior head coach. And when he said that to me, I was like, whoa, like this time it sounds like I did a lot, but I was probably in the sport for maybe 1.5 years to 2 years. So to progress from being an athlete to not being able to powerlift to being like head junior coach was like a really, really quick turnaround.
Yeah.
But I kind of just threw myself in the deep end and thought it would be great for me to do it. And I love coaching. It's really fun. So I did it. And then, to be honest, like Calgary, the first competition where I was head junior coach, it was very daunting. And I was thinking, right, I've got X amount of lifters here. They've all worked really hard with their coaches and they've worked the whole year for this one event. And the responsibility pretty much is on me. So it's kind of like a big burden, but it's been great so far. And you learn more and more every competition you coach at, and the more athletes you handle and interact with. So
yeah,
that's how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, I must admit when you're saying there about that they've trained all for that competition, I find it quite exciting when I'm handling lifters. I actually learnt from the guy who was my first powerlifting coach about handling people and taking people to competitions. And it just comes with experience. I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. But yeah, similar sort of pathway of I originally played rugby, and then for one reason or another couldn't really commit to training. So the next best thing was powerlifting. And yeah, I don't know whether you feel the same, but it's a lot better than having 15 other blokes trying to smash you into the floor than trying to do a heavy squat or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, at times I do miss it, but when it's freezing cold, I'm glad that I'm in a warm gym lifting iron rather than.
Yeah, I actually got asked to. I played a couple of weeks ago, and went to go turn out, and the captain this season said, "Oh yeah, we were short on a few players. Do you fancy having a game?" I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." Oh, it's an away game. Yeah, no worries. I can drive there. Turned out it was a local derby. So after not playing for maybe season and a half, 2 seasons, to then strut into a local derby was I was feeling a little bit sore Sunday morning. But it's always in the background of I would quite like to be in that environment again, because unless you're training around with similar sort of people for powerlifting, I think sometimes it can be you are sort of by yourself a little bit. So it's good when you're training with a good group of people.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit there about powerlifting, built that foundation of being able to train strength for not just powerlifters, but strength athletes as well. And one of the main things that I get asked from, because most of the people that I train are beginners for powerlifting, is the core. So basically the importance of that. What is it, and can you direct it? Can you train it directly? So having seen quite some of the stuff that you've put out there, sort of get into the meat of it. what is the core? Why is it important?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's not just abdominals. Like a lot of people would think, oh, we're going to do some core today. We're going to go do some sit-ups and some abs. I don't think there's any kind of concrete definition, but essentially the spine and the pelvis and all the muscles and the soft tissues that surround that and connect to that. So the muscles that connect directly to the spine, the muscles that connect directly to the pelvis, that basically is the core. So you can kind of describe it, if I was to describe it, you would call it like a cylinder or a box. So you've got the anterior, so the front portion, you've got your abdominals, transverse rectus abdominis. Those are the muscles that obviously cause flexing of the trunk. Then on the back, posterior muscles, you've got the erector spina, the multifidus, the glutes. They're the muscles that cause extension. Then you've got the kind of the sides, which would be the obliques and the QL. And then you've got the top and the bottom, and you can kind of describe that. The top would be the diaphragm, the bottom would be the pelvic floor muscles. And that basically makes up what is called the core. So it's more a set of muscles that kind of control the trunk and the hip rather than just your abdominals.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, because, you know, every time people are coming, not just people who are doing powerlifting, but sort of general population as well, coming in, like you said, doing loads of sit-ups and that sort of stuff. Why is it important when it comes to strength training and powerlifting? Because I do think it's one of those things where it's overlooked sometimes and isn't given enough credit that it's due, really.
So if you think about the function of the core, so what it's there for, it's not just to look good. The core is basically there to resist movement and transfer force. So that's kind of the function, if you like, of the core. In terms of why we need a stable core, it's, I would say, two main reasons. It's for injury prevention and for performance enhancement. And, I mean, I've read a lot of stuff that says that it's not, or maybe not as applicable to performance enhancement as a lot of people have suggested. But I do think it's particularly important for powerlifting. And if I'm talking about the core, it's not just the strength of the core, it's the stability. Mm-hmm. And those two things are different. So if you think about strength is our ability to produce force. Using me as an example, I injured my lower back, L4, L5, or 5S1, and my SI joint. I was squatting 250 kilos at the time. I don't have weak glutes. I don't have a necessarily weak back. And I don't have weak abs because I train them all the time. But your ability to produce force kind of in the glutes, in the lower back extensions, glute ham raises, those exercises isolate the muscle and train them kind of to get stronger in isolation to produce more force. But stability is actually the ability to resist movement in one part of the body whilst there's movement occurring in another part of the body. For example, with a squat, or if you're throwing a ball, or if you're kicking a ball, or even if you're walking, you need to be able to stabilize the trunk and have no movement there to permit effective force transfer in other parts of the body. So training the core is important, obviously for injury prevention and for performance enhancement. How you do that is going to be quite particular as well at the same time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's summed it up quite well. A good example. It's funny that you said about your back, because actually I injured my back on Saturday. This was before I sent the emails out. We chatted by email. Again, sort of, it was actually when I was deadlifting, not when I was squatting. And the lift was fine, like my back wasn't arching or anything like that. And yeah, just put the bar down and my back just went. After seeing the physio and spending a good chunk of time, well, basically all weekend with it, it turned out that everything else was just really, really tight. And like what you're saying there about, being able to hold one position and then move and do something else.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. It got to a point where something just ended up giving up. So got the tape on my back, doing a few exercises, and like I say, quads, glutes, and everything like that is fine. But it was just one of those things that I didn't probably put as much effort into the core side of things that I should have done. So this will be quite a good chat, not just for people listening, but for me to sort of make my back a little bit better.
And it's that, but it's also kind of being strong, but also being stable. And a lot of people don't know how to create that stability. So you can be really strong, and you hear people say all the time, get tight, squeeze, brace, blah, blah, blah. But somebody might not actually be able to do that. They understand what you're saying and what you want them to do, but they can't actually do it or get into that position that they need. And it's about, like I said, the effective force transfer. So you could have really strong glutes and quads. You could drop down, and you've got the potential to drive with your legs. But then if you've got a squishy back, or it's not stiff, it's not rigid, then you're just going to get energy leaks all up the kinetic chain, and the amount of force that you can transfer from your legs to the bar on your back, or to the deadlift, to the bar on your hands for the deadlift, is going to be less, because you're losing force when you've got that loose back. The second reason, I don't know if I said it or not, is movement efficiency.
Yes.
So obviously we talk about biomechanical efficiency, getting into great positions in order to lift. If you don't have a stable core and you're not strong and you're not rigid, then you're not going to be able to get into the most biomechanically efficient position to lift the weight. So you're then at another disadvantage.
Yeah. This is what I always say. It's predominantly like the beginners and intermediates that come to the powerlifting club, but it's just being, as I say, just imagine you're only designed to squat. You want to be as efficient as you can, and every rep needs to be the same. If something happens in the squat, like you're saying there about the spine and that sort of stuff, you're just wasting energy, wasting force. So actually, that comes quite nicely on to the next question that I was going to ask. So you chatted there a little bit about the squat, and how I teach that is take a big breath in through your nose, short breath out through your mouth, and you'll feel your tummy brace or stretch, and then you can go into the squat. How does maybe the importance of the core, or how to activate it, change from lift to lift? So in the squat, bench, and deadlift and powerlifting.
The actual importance of bracing and using the core.
Yeah. Because I find it quite easy to coach it for the squat, but when I try and use that same thing for the deadlift, sometimes because they're hunched over, people are a little bit, well, how do I do it in this?
Yeah, I think it does, in terms of the actual the Valsalva, what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to increase that intra-abdominal pressure. You're trying to get that co-contraction of all of the core muscles together to stabilize the spine. I don't think that changes, but I think maybe the way you do it in terms of getting into position and when you do it will differ between the lifts.
Yeah.
I think obviously it's a little bit different in the bench press, because obviously you're trying to get a big arch, so you're not trying to maintain a neutral spine. With the squat, yes, you got the bar on your back. You take that big breath in, fill the stomach with air, push the diaphragm down. What I say to my lifters, you can easily see if you've got the air and the breath in the right place. If you take a big breath in and your chest inflates, then you haven't done it right, because you've got all the air up there. You're not creating any pressure in the abdomen and kind of that 360 degrees protection around the spine.
Yeah.
So you take that big breath in, you squeeze, and then you squat. For the deadlift, I think it depends on individual, but it's funny enough. I had this conversation with Lawrence a couple of days ago. I was really struggling because I haven't worn a belt for the best part of 2 years. Squat, I was okay, and then the deadlift just seemed to fall apart. I couldn't get into a neutral spine, or even an extended spine position with the belt on. And that was affecting how I initiated the Valsalva maneuver and got into position. So I think since doing that and kind of learning, the way you come down to the bar is a little bit more important, especially if you're new to using the belt and you haven't done it very often.
Yeah.
So kind of what he said was to get into a certain position, get your back into the good position that you want, and then come down to the bar, rather than almost kind of pulling yourself into extension, if that makes sense. So instead of fighting the bigger, stronger muscles, trying to extend the back, you would get into that position already and then lower yourself to the bar in a relatively good position where all you need to do from that position is, I'm trying to do it as I'm sitting down. But from that position, you would take the breath in and you're bent over to the bar, but with a relatively straight back, and then initiate the Valsalva maneuver. So fill your stomach with air, take the bar, and then get tight.
Oh, has it paused?
To extend the back and get into a good position.
Yeah.
Kind of answers the question.
Yeah. It just paused for a second, and I wondered what was going on. I thought you just stood still for a couple of seconds. Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you're saying there about lowering yourself down to the bar, a lot of things that I try and instill in the lifters in my club is think about that same setup all the time, because then it becomes routine. And again, going back to what you were saying about movement efficiency, it's again just doing the same things over and over again, doing that in your warm-up sets. And the more you do it, the more it becomes second nature to then get into that routine of doing it. Just because, you know, sometimes if we're starting at the start of the program, we're doing loads and loads of reps, right? You might not do it for every single rep, but the more you try and do it, the better it'll be. And then that will help when it's getting down to the lower reps and we start lifting a little bit heavier. And again, going back to that thing, the very first point that you made about the importance of the core is, again, not to injure yourself and you know, improve your performance.
I think that's important in terms of, obviously, talking about, everybody throws around the term movement efficiency and biomechanical efficiency. At the end of the day, you're trying to lift the most weight that you can through the smallest range of motion, right? Within the rules of the sport. So if we're more biomechanically efficient, it's basically talking about getting into positions that allow us to take advantage of our levers, allow us to shorten moment arms, and recruit the largest muscle groups that is going to make the lift easier for us. So in terms of that, so we're basically, if we're more efficient, then we can move more weight with less force production. So, and that's I think is important to tell people. That's why it's so important. It's not just we're banging on about, oh, you've got to be more efficient in your lifting, because a lot of people say powerlifting is just about lifting weight. No one judges your technique. Yes, that's right. But if you can get into a better position and be more biomechanically efficient, then you're going to be able to have the potential to lift more weight. Everything else being equal, if you're lifting bent back and your hips really high, compared to somebody that lifts in a great position, hips in the right position, back in the right position, they're going to lift that weight with a lot more in the tank, whereas the other person won't. So that's the importance of saying to people, right, when you're warming up, treat that bar or that 60 kilos like it's 160 kilos, 260 kilos, because it's a habit, so that you know, if you can create that intrinsic tension with 60 kilos, you're going to do it with 260, right? But my pet hate is when I see lifters, or I see my lifters warming up, they're doing a squat or a deadlift and they're just bouncing up and down, looks terrible. And I was like, what's that? What are you doing? It's only a warm-up, but treat that like it's not a warm-up, and then it becomes more habitual, and then you can actually focus and just perform in the lift rather than thinking, right, chest up, back tight, blah, 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 blah.
Why I'm smiling is that I can hear the conversation I had with one of my lifters, and generally it was literally last week. And we worked quite a lot on his deadlift. His deadlift before was basically a squat. And we've got him hinging and that sort of stuff. And I remember chatting, and he said, said, but no, we're going to work on your technique a little bit and, make it look a little bit better, make it look a little bit more efficient. And his response was, yeah, but I've lifted it. I've picked it up. I've not hurt myself. And I just sort of said, you've not hurt yourself yet. So yes, really strong guy. But I want you to lift. The main thing I say is, powerlifting, you've got to be patient. It's like the long game. You will get stronger. Just stick with it. Sometimes taking a step back to work on technique can make you take three steps forward. When I started chatting to him about it, it finally clicked. But yeah, it was but I've lifted it. It's fine. It's like no, go through those motions. Make sure every lift is the same. So yeah, I'm quite glad you said that. Then it means that what I'm saying isn't too bad. In terms of actual what you would program for training the core, is there anything that you would do before training to sort of, like we mentioned there about making people engage the core and switch it on? What's your sort of go-to for that?
I think it depends on the individual. In terms of actual training, I think abdominal exercises like crunches and stuff are not really necessary. You need a good amount of anterior strength to prevent you going into extension, so arching the lower back basically. And I've found that women seem to be worse at that than guys. I don't know if it's whether just due to their flexibility in their spine or what have you, but I find that the girls, and that's also to do with the glutes and the glute med as well, but activating the anterior core and the glutes, I think help a lot to help people with a lower back arch or extension. So sometimes if I've got a girl that is particularly lordotic, which I've got a few, what I found is they're lifting, they go from extension, low back arch, and they start, by the time they get to the bottom, they're tucking under. So they've got so much movement in their hips and their spine, there's just no stability there. So sometimes I'll give someone like a weighted plank, and I'll get them to do some tube walks to activate their glute med before they squat, and that does make a difference. But I think whatever you would do to activate those muscles, it has to just be that. So you only want to activate, you don't want to pre-fatigue, because there's no point in battering them with a load of core work before they're going to go and squat, because they're just going to be even weaker and even worse than they were before. So in answer to your question, yes, I would give certain things, maybe plank, maybe some tube walk for some glute activation, but A, it would depend on the individual and what they needed, and B, it would only be 1 or 2 sets just to switch them on, rather than actually training it to fatigue it.
Yeah, that's a good point, really, because I know sometimes when I program exercises before they start training, they'll want to they'll think it's part of the session rather than just their movement prep. And it's like, no, just take it steady on these. It is just to, right, are we switched on? Are we ready? Right, let's go into the main exercise. What's your take on, because for some of the lifters, I've programmed breathing exercises, so like a sandbell on the tummy, and like you were mentioned before about if the breath's all up in the chest. What's your take on breathing? Again, is it only certain people that you program it to, or what's your take on it?
So I actually read a study the other day actually that it had a bracing protocol rather than breathing, and they actually found that I think it was 8 weeks of just bracing. I think they performed like 3 or 4 sets of 10 2-second braces, and they found that they had significant increases in intra-abdominal pressure and significant increases in hip and trunk extension, even though it's just bracing. So that kind of confirmed to me that there is some kind of validity in what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I kind of got involved in all of this stuff because of my own injury, but it has seemed to have helped a lot of my clients and my lifters. And I've had people with hip pain and back pain, and I've done this sort of thing with them, and it has helped. So in terms of the exercises, I would probably, it depends on the individual as well, again. And it's just to say as well, that study was with novices. So obviously those increases could have been just because they're novice, but certainly I work with a lot of novice lifters. I know you said you do as well. So that would be applicable in those situations. There's kind of 3 levels of exercises that I would use and that I would program. And it would depend again on the individual, where they're at. Are they trying to improve performance? Are they trying to rehab? What is the focus of programming those exercises? But the first one would be breathing and bracing, because essentially all of the core exercises that I would program would be exercises that focus on bracing and focus on integrating all of the core muscles to co-contract together rather than trying to train them in isolation. So I would rarely use a back extension or a glute ham raise as an exercise. It would just be to strengthen those muscles.
Yeah.
In terms of core, the breathing and the bracing would be like level 1, if you like. And that would be for people that need to learn what a neutral spine position actually is and how to get tight. Because you say to someone, get tight, and they're like, well, I am tight. What am I doing? Kind of thing. So that's well, it applies for novices, but you'll be surprised how many lifters that have actually done a few competitions and are relatively kind of intermediate, but still don't know actually how to properly brace. So things like the 90-90 breathing drill, I find really good. Even just lying without legs up on the wall, lying flat, taking a deep breath in and then exhaling whilst you're squeezing the stomach and the core and trying to feel the abdominals, but also everything around you tighten up. That helps them to kind of get that proprioception of what it actually feels like to brace, to feel that tightness and tension. And then the second or the third exercise that would be good is just a simple plank. I would start with a plank and get them to, again, breathe in through the nose and then exhale fully through the mouth. And they start shaking like a leaf and they start feeling like head's going to explode and it's feeling really tight. And I said, that's what you need to feel when you're standing up with the bar or when you're getting ready to drive the bar from the floor in a deadlift. And then kind of understand. And then you can take that a step further by having weighted variations. So as soon as you have someone on a plank, I wouldn't do any more than 30 seconds, 45 seconds max. So once they easy, start loading them up with weight. And then they have an external resistance that they have to force themselves to brace and be tight. That just kind of further enhances what we're trying to achieve for getting them to have that bracing effect. So that's the kind of the breathing and the bracing, how I would start to coach that to somebody if they didn't understand what to do by me just kind of verbally telling them.
It's one of the most used coaching cues in powerlifting. Get tight. You kind of hear everyone say that. It's interesting that you mentioned about the plank, because you do it in classes or you'll get people to do it before training, and it's surprising how hard people do find it or how easy people think that it's going to be, and it's like no, like this is how we're going to do it properly, so that it's a good carryover into your training. Do you find that with these exercises, even with the beginners that you train with and sort of the lifters that you've taken to the Euros, do you find that you always still add in a little bit of core training for everyone, or?
Yes, I do have a little bit. So in terms of, obviously the lifters at the Euros aren't actually my lifters. They train with their coaches and I work with them. So I don't really coach them one-to-one, so I wouldn't program anything. But I actually have given a couple of exercises to a couple of the lifters on the day. There was one guy that had an injury before he came out. It was a back injury. And obviously I've had back injuries, so I kind of knew what I was doing. And he said that he basically had a bar on his back and all the weights had fallen off one side and he'd had a back injury at one side. So I said, right, you need to be as stable as you can. And if you can increase that amount of stability that you've got in your spine, then you probably won't feel much. So all I literally got him to do was get on the floor and I put 15 kilo on his back. Got a few funny looks from some of the other coaches, but he did a plank for 30 seconds for 2 sets and he started squatting and he said, I don't feel it. I feel fine. So that's an example of somebody that probably needs to do more core stabilization work to strengthen that, because at the end of the day, yes, we're powerlifters, we only work in a sagittal plane, but you have to walk out with the bar, you have to walk the bar back in. You might get unwanted movement. If you lose a line, you might twist. So you've got to be strong in all directions, in the sagittal, frontal and transverse plane, to protect yourself from injury and also make yourself stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I think quite a lot of my movement prep and different movements that I'll do are in different planes of movement. I think sometimes people can forget that, yes, powerlifting, squat, bench and deadlift, but you're a human as well. You're a person. You still need to be. One of the funny things, it was actually my staff Christmas do on Saturday, and I obviously hurt my back on Saturday, and it was one of those things where I looked down to try and do my shoelaces, and I was just thinking, I'm going to struggle a little bit here. And the amount of lifters that you'll sometimes see that just do the same movements over and over again, a little bit just broaden that out a little bit, just be a little bit more robust. So you're not gonna.
It helps coming from like a rugby or strength and conditioning background, because I tend to find that people that just do powerlifting just know powerlifting, and aren't really open to anything else. But I think if you've come from a slightly more sporting background, then that's kind of the first fundamentals and foundations that you learn about, or good foundation. So that kind of helped, and that's why, as well as my injury, why I'm so kind of anal with this kind of stuff, if you like.
So moving on to you mentioned a little bit about it, that you yourself haven't lifted with a belt for up to 2 years. What are your take on people using belts? When do you think people should start using belts? And during the warm-up sets, would you advise people to use the belt throughout the warm-up sets, or get to a certain point and then add the belt in?
I think you need to be able to brace, and you have to have a certain degree of stability and be able to create a certain amount of stability before you use a belt, because you don't want to use the belt to mask your inability to brace, if that makes sense. For powerlifting and just for like everyday life, if you get used to something else doing all of the work for you, then you could be lifting a box, you could be bending down to get something, and like you say, your back just goes. So you have bracing is something, and stability is something for everyday life, not just powerlifting. I wouldn't use the belt for every single set. I would say, kind of in general, as a rule, 80 to 85%, I would put the belt on for your last few warm-up sets. I wouldn't kind of whack it on for the bar and the 60 and all the rest of it. And in terms of when you start using it, I'd always get a lifter to, if it was a complete novice or someone that needs kind of repatterning and a lot of technique work, I wouldn't use a belt at all for that first 1 or 2 phases. And then I would start to introduce the work as we start to kind of intensify the training. But then, even then, I would still say only put it on as you approach your working sets, rather than using it right from the start. Because at the end of the day, using the belt is also a skill, as I found out last week. Not used it for 2 years, it's not something you just put on and you can use. So there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, imagine if I was using the belt." But in actual fact, if you haven't used the belt for a long period of time, or in fact ever, then you're probably going to have to go backwards to learn how to use it before you can start lifting heavier weights.
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of, which I think sometimes causes a little bit of confusion, is people use a belt to mask maybe a weakness in their back or something like that. Whereas the whole point of using a belt is so you can get that like you mentioned, brace against the belt. But again, like he's mentioned, you've still got to be a person to be able to, you're not gonna. If someone says, "Oh, can you just pick this box up for me?" You won't be like, "Oh, give me 2 seconds. I need to go get my belt to pick it up."
Yeah, exactly.
You've still got to be able to move as a person.
I've always said that the belt is a performance aid.
Yeah.
If you're wearing a belt for safety reasons, then you're using it for the wrong reasons, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. It's a little bit similar to when people use supplements. You know, it is a supplement. It doesn't replace real food. You know, you use it as a supplement, much like the belt and knee sleeves and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So going into the obviously you mentioned about some of the stuff that or exercises you would use before training. What about actually within the training session? Is there anything that you would program or advise for exercises to do within the training session?
Yes. So you've got, like I said, the phase one, which is like the breathing and the bracing and the rest of it. The kind of next phase that I would do, and I may include these in the warm up, or I'd include them before or after. So kind of these are exercises that might fatigue you a little bit more, and you would do them at the end of the session. Would be exercises where you kind of bring in movement. So once you're able to brace and stabilize your core, I think you then need to learn how to stay tight whilst you've got limb movement involved. So exercises like the bird dog or quadruped, plank variations, plank with an arm reach or a leg reach, or a plank with a row, plank pull-throughs, side planks with leg raises, things like that that would be more fatiguing, but actually work the core and work the kind of muscles in a more endurance sense. I would include those at the end of a session. And then exercises during a session, they would be like programmed. If I see a weakness in somebody, then I would program certain exercises to help counteract that. And they would be exercises that are more kind of transferable, if you like, to the squat, bench, and the deadlift. For example, there was one of my clients, she twisted a lot when she deadlifted. So she'd lift the bar. As soon as she lift the bar, she'd get some rotation effect. We grip and all the rest of it, but it was still happening. So I programmed suitcase deadlifts, for example. So those deadlifts, either a dumbbell or a bar in one hand, arm up by your head, and you lift. So that really works the frontal plane. So it's anti-rotation. That's really good, kind of an exercise for combating that. You've also got exercises like shovel deadlifts, which I've never done, but I've seen people doing, where you basically load one side of the bar up and you stand closest to the side that's loaded and you lift the bar. There's also, you can load a deadlift unevenly, which I have done, and you don't need a lot. So I've had, I think, 100 kilos on the bar, 5 kilos more on one side than the other, and you lift it and you feel like a tremendous kind of force against your opposite side, and you're having to work really hard to stabilize and stay upright. So that would be another exercise you could program. And I quite regularly program farmers walks as well, single arm and double arm, and that obviously really helps. And these are all the frontal plane exercises that really help. In terms of like the sagittal, so working the front, I find front squats, or more particularly zombie squats, are really good. That they really force you to brace, and after you've done 3 or 4 sets of zombie squats, you really feel it in your abs the next day.
Yeah.
So there are exercises that I would include within a program if I see kind of certain things that people need to improve on.
Yeah. And you know, why I wanted you as a guest as well is the stuff that you put out there is effective, but it's not overly complicated. Because what I quite like about all the exercises there is sometimes you'll see people doing crazy exercises to try and get the core engaged, and it's a little bit like, why are you doing that when, you know, a suitcase carry? I've done suitcase carries. Done right, they can be quite challenging. They can be quite hard, and all you're doing is walking up and down, holding a dumbbell on a farmer's walk. So yeah, definitely some exercises. I've not tried out mainly because I'm a little bit unsure about the deadlift weights on either side, but I might have a little bit of a play around with that.
It was just the Romanian deadlift, or was it stiff leg deadlift actually? and it was 100 kilos with an extra 5 on one side. That's basically what it was. If you do, I don't know, 3 reps, 4 reps on one side, and then step over the bar, turn around and do 4 on that side, and only 5 kilos, you notice a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and as well, if I ever do it, I can always say, "Oh, I was meaning to do it. I didn't really mean to put the guys on the other side."
Yeah.
So yeah, everything that we chatted through there, I know from my point of view, there's a few things that I'm quite glad that reinforces what I'm doing isn't too far wrong, and as well gives me food for thought what I can use, especially just coincident. I ended up hurting my back on Saturday, so a couple of things that I can work on after speaking with the physio. But to sum up after everything that we've spoken about in this episode, what would be your words of wisdom or take-home points for everyone listening?
I would say use core stability training, not trying to improve the strength of your core. So focus on the bracing effect and focus on co-contraction of all of the core muscles together rather than trying to isolate them. You would use your core stability training for improving performance or preventing injury. Don't pre-fatigue the muscles. So if you're doing any kind of core work, activate with 1 to 2 sets at the most. If you want to actually train your core, then do those do those exercises at the end of a session or in a separate, maybe like accessory session. And then just remember that essentially a weak core or an inability to stabilize leads to inefficient movement. And it reduces your ability to transfer force. So you want to have that stable core so that you can lift the heavier weights. So it's not something to be neglected. At the same time, it's not something that you need to do for half of a session. If you can do a little bit in each session or in a couple of sessions a week, then that's probably going to be more than enough. And then probably lastly, research at the minute shows that if you're a novice, then it's probably going to be massively effective for you. Mm-hmm. If you're advanced, it may not be as effective, but I would still include at least a few exercises in once or twice a week.
Yeah, definitely. That was quite nicely summed up there. I know it's an area, when people ask me questions, I always try and either, if I can't give them an answer, find the person who can give a good answer. And obviously the research that you've mentioned, the exercises that you've used, definitely something that I found interesting to chat about. So everyone listening who either might have some more questions on core training or want to get involved in coaching with you or ask you any more questions, where can people find you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, I post quite regularly on there. Jason Coultman, strength coach. And then my website, jasoncoultman.com, will be the 2 or 3 places that you probably find me on.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Thanks very much for taking the time to chat with me. I know having a pretty busy schedule with Euros. Hopefully it'll quiet down now heading into Christmas. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks again, Jason. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all. Well, actually, this is going to be the last episode of 2018. So actually, I will see you all in 2019, where hopefully I'll have a few more guests lined up and some more content for you. So thank you very much, and I'll see you all.
Cheers.